All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Wonderful. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you here today. I thought that I met everyone last night at the opening reception and hospitality suite, but I'm seeing a lot of new faces this morning. So come say hello at the break, at lunch, at the auction dinner tonight. I would love to hear what everybody's up to and how I can help. Thank you, Al, for that lovely introduction. Today, I want to talk to you about who I am and why I'm standing before you here today and some of the stuff that I work on. Introduce to you some of the science and conservation behind the problem that I'm trying to solve, and also some of the strategies that I found work and some of the strategies that I found absolutely do not work when trying to persuade the public that we should conserve and protect a group of animals that many people not only fear, but even hate. Throughout, I will share some success stories and case studies, and also some pitfalls to avoid. I am going to be talking to you today about some lessons that I have learned from my career, and while many of the examples come from the world of sharks, many of the principles I think you'll find are broadly applicable. If any of you are nerds who want to do a deep dive and learn more, I'll provide references for everything here. And at the end of this, I've left plenty of time for questions, and I'm expecting some interesting questions from this group. As Al mentioned, I've spoken to thousands of people all over the world about this. I've spoken with groups of journalists, groups of environmental advocates, groups of scuba divers, groups of fishermen. I also do an Ask Me Anything every week on social media, which means I can just about guarantee that the weirdest question you can think of is not the weirdest question I've ever been asked. And I'd be happy to answer anything that you want to know about this stuff. I just ask that you please hold questions to the end. So who am I? As Al mentioned, I am an interdisciplinary conservation biologist based in the Washington, D.C. area. I wear a lot of different hats, but broadly I run an ocean conservation communications and policy consulting firm. My clients used to include NOAA, not so much of that this year, but also I'm doing a lot of work for environmental nonprofits, some state wildlife management agencies, UN Food and Agriculture, a variety of museums, and things like that. I'm also an author. Al mentioned my first book, Why Sharks Matter. I turned in the complete draft of my second book last Friday, so excited to be celebrating here in Atlantic City the completion of that. If you are thank you. If you're interested in getting a copy, I have donated 2 copies to the silent auction this evening tonight, and I also have some extras that are available that I'm happy to sign for you. That's what was in the suitcase I was lugging around the bar last night. I also do a lot of science communication and public science engagement training to early career scientists and natural resource management professionals all over the world. I've trained over 2,000 people on 5 continents, and we also do have a workshop tomorrow morning focusing on some of these issues. And again, I do a lot of work with social media public science engagement at Why Sharks Matter. So you guys are all working in the field of public science engagement and public conservation engagement, but I wanted to share with you a lot of times I'm speaking with scientists, and I wanted to share with you the answer that I give when scientists ask me, wait, why should we do this at all? The short answer, you're all hopefully convinced of this already because you're doing it as a career, but many of my consulting clients, many of the people I speak to are a little skeptical of the idea. Well, the short answer is, if all we do is live in the ivory tower and do our research and publish our research in journals that not only no one ever reads, but no one's ever heard of, that alone does not change the world, to put it mildly. It is important that we break out of the ivory tower because I think recent events have shown that it matters what people think about science and the role of science and the value of science, even if those people don't necessarily work with science. And we, as experts, have a role in communicating that. Not only what we do, not only broad conclusions, but why does it matter that we are spending public resources on something like this? It matters that everyone appreciates the role and value of science, and that requires experts engaging with the public. So in general, the problem that I'm trying to solve is that sharks, despite being ecologically important animals, are highly threatened. They're in fact one of the most threatened groups of vertebrate animals in the world. Frogs are worse off because of a fungal disease affecting rainforest frogs, and that's it. More than a third of all known species of sharks and their relatives are threatened with extinction according to the IUCN Red List, which is something that a lot of people did not know. There are a lot of policy tools that we know work, but there are also a lot of people who are guessing what we need to do to help save sharks, and to put it mildly, they are guessing wrong. So what we need here is large-scale public engagement, but it needs to be informed and targeted. So that is a conservation challenge. Lots of people ask me, and I had some of these conversations with you guys last night, isn't working with sharks an advantage in this? People love big, charismatic animals. It must be easy to get them to care about these animals. Well, I'll give you this. When I start my public talks, I do not have to start with, this is what a shark is, you probably haven't heard of it. Lots of people have heard of sharks, and sharks are a big part of public culture. Happy Shark Week to everyone, by the way. I counted in the lobby shop of this very Sheraton 7 items that have sharks on them. And walking on the boardwalk yesterday, more than 20 t-shirts, kickboards, and shot glasses, a lot of shot glasses, with sharks on them. So sharks are very much in the public consciousness, but a lot of people are terrified of them or even hate them. When I tell some people a third of all known species of sharks are threatened with extinction, they say, good, how can we get 100% threatened with extinction? But also, even among the people who are convinced that they want to help, they misunderstand the problem and they misunderstand the available solutions and how they work. So it is absolutely a challenging conservation issue for a lot of multifaceted reasons. I often have to break down people's misunderstanding before I can build back up how to get them to care. When I say there's a lot of nonsense in this space, Shark Week is a big part of that. This is one of my favorite media articles that's ever been written about my outreach efforts. Watch as Shark Week slowly drives this scientist insane. I used to live tweet reviews and commentary of Shark Week specials as they aired, and apparently over the course of the week, my posts got less tethered to reality. But when I say Shark Week is a dumpster fire of lies and nonsense, I want to be clear that we did the science on this. We checked. We used a research method called media content and discourse analysis, which basically means we had a core team of undergraduate volunteers who watched all of Shark Week ever and scientifically documented what's in it. At the time, 202 hours of documentaries. And one of the statistics that the media found the most striking, this is a picture of the Washington Post article about it, was although my field is more than 2/3 women, you would not know that from watching Shark Week, where they not only feature more men than women, they feature more guys named Mike than women. And when that was the Washington Post headline about our study, Mike Rowe, Discovery Channel host of Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe, who was one of the Shark Week featured people, got real sad and posted that picture. That was my Facebook profile picture for a year. So an important lesson that I've learned when trying to get people to care about this is you make it personal. You have a narrative. You are a character in your story. You are not, when you are talking to the public, you are not just reading a textbook to them. It matters that you're the one who's there. So I want to give an example to you from my book talks, which I've given all over the world, usually partnering with science museums or zoos or aquariums or libraries or independent bookstores. So when I say my book tour, I want to just give a little bit of context about this. I'll mention this a little bit, but my book, Why Sharks Matter, is published by Johns Hopkins University Press. It's an academic publisher. They've been wonderful to me, but they have a budget of $0 for marketing. So I did all of my marketing myself, and I self-organized using social media what's now become more than a 70-city international book tour. It is still ongoing. Though I am no longer doing 3 weeks on the road, a different city every night, as I was at the start of this. And in the context of this, I've spoken to thousands of people as young as 3 years old. The oldest person who self-identified was 97. So it's been a wide range of people. And here is how I start my book tour talk, to give you a sense of personal narrative, and contrast this with some talks you may have seen that might start with something like, well, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a shark as a fish of subclass Elasmobranchi. That's boring. This is what I do. I've loved sharks for a really long time. I'm 3 years old in that picture. There are pictures of me even younger than that, having shark t-shirts and shark toys. And tonight I want to explain to you some of the things that I've learned about sharks in a career of being obsessed with them, and some of the lessons that I've learned. Do you see how that's a little more interesting, a little more personal, a little more engaging? You can do that too. The reasons why you're interested in horseshoe crabs or bears or deer are more interesting than just facts and figures from a textbook. Yeah, someone asked me this morning if I have a different shark shirt for every day of the conference. I have a different shark shirt for every day of the year. Okay, so another lesson that I've learned in doing this is while it is important to communicate facts and figures, that should absolutely be part of your talks, no one wants that to be dry and stuffy and boring, just like you're reading from table 173 from a textbook. You can communicate these facts in a way that make people say, wow, that's cool, and want to learn more. And I will freely concede that this is an area where sharks probably have an advantage, but this is something you can absolutely do for bears or deer or horseshoe crabs. Here's another example from my book tour talk. So what I usually do, and I think I'll do this with you guys too, you guys are a fun group. I usually do this when I speak at children's libraries. I give people 15 seconds to shout out as many shark species as they can think of. Let's do that, go ahead. Shout out shark species. Thresher, hammerhead, lemon, great white, sandbar, sand tiger, tiger, mako, white tip. All right, and stop. That was 11. That was pretty good, you guys. The record was an elementary school in my neighborhood in suburban DC. They got 17. Not bad, but that was not bad. There are 536 known species of sharks, and there is a new species of shark, skate, ray, or chimera discovered somewhere in the world about every 2 weeks. These animals come in just about every shape, size, color, habitat, and behavior that you can imagine. The largest is the size of a school bus. The smallest is the size of your arm. Some live in coral reefs. Some live in the deepest part of the deep sea where it's so dark that sunlight never reaches. Some live under Arctic ice. Some live up rivers. The U.S. Navy SEALs have a saying that if you want to see if there are sharks in the water near you, you dip your finger in the water and you taste it, and if it's salty, you're in the ocean and there are sharks near you. And that's true, but it's incomplete because, again, there are sharks that live up rivers, and more than just bull sharks, no matter what Shark Week tells you. Here are some of my favorite weird and wonderful species to illustrate the amazing diversity of these animals. In the lower right, that's the American pocket shark. It is not called that because it's small enough to fit in your pocket, though it is. Blown up like this, that's bigger than they are actual size. It is called that because of this pocket of flesh they have behind their eye that's full of glow-in-the-dark liquid that they can squirt on command to startle away predators. In the lower left, that's a megamouth shark. There's a few things that I love about megamouth sharks. One of those things is their scientific name. You guys have to communicate scientific names in your documents and sometimes in your talks, but you may not know what they mean. They often translate to something like the brown bird with the gray dot on its head, which is descriptive, if not necessarily evocative. This is Megacosma pelagios, the giant mouth of the deep. By science standards, that's poetry. That, in the middle, is an angular rough shark. When most people think about sharks, you think of them as being fast, athletic, sleek. The angular rough shark is the exact opposite of that. It's one of the slowest moving animals in the ocean. Picture an overinflated football. I had to be careful when I talk about overinflated footballs when I gave this talk in Boston, with a giant fins glued to the top that just sort of hangs out. These guys eat only the egg cases of other sharks. So just to give you a sense of some of the amazing diversity here, and they also have absolutely amazing behaviors. This is a goblin shark. Lots of animals can hyperextend their jaws in front of their face like that. Snakes famously do this. But nothing does it as far or as fast as a goblin shark. That video is slowed down 100 times. When the video is not slowed down, there is a fish in front of his face, and then there isn't. That video is not slowed down. That is as fast as Greenland sharks move. But they're in no particular hurry because they're the longest lived vertebrate animal in the world. They can live to be over 400 years old. They also eat polar bears. Right? Make them say wow. Every time I've said that, every time. Even in the context of teaching how to make people say wow. People say wow. This is a kite fin shark. It's the largest of the shark species whose whole bodies glow in the dark. And there is a whole group of these called lantern sharks. And my favorite lantern shark is the ninja lantern shark. It is called that because my friend and colleague Vicky, who discovered it around Thanksgiving and was home with her family, and everyone was talking about what's new at school, what's new at work. And she said, I discovered a new species of shark and I get to name it whatever I want. And her young cousin runs into the room and says, ninjas are cool, call it the ninja shark. So she did. I challenge you to find a more wholesome science story than that. So some other things that I want people to know when I'm doing my communication to try to persuade people that we need to protect sharks include, sharks are not a threat to you and your safety. When most people think about sharks at all, which most people don't, they think about sharks in the context of being a threat to you and your family. Some people are so afraid of sharks that they're afraid to go in a pool or a lake. So how do you convince people that something that can sometimes hurt you is actually something good? So something that I have found works pretty well here is humor, and I'll give you another example from my book talk. Sharks are simply not a significant threat to you and your family, and sometimes people are hurt by sharks. Sometimes people are even hurt badly or even die. But when we're talking about public policy responses, it is important to keep in mind the relative risk of things like that versus the relative benefit. So here are some things that kill more people than sharks in a typical year. More people in a typical year are killed by flower pots falling on their head from above when they walk down a street than are killed by sharks. More people are bitten by other people on the New York City subway system each year than are bitten by sharks in the whole world. As a social media guy, I love this one. More people die falling off cliffs while trying to take selfies of the scenery behind them than are killed by sharks. So this is simply something that you do not need to worry about. If you've ever been in the ocean, there was a shark not that far from you, and it knew you were there, and it left you alone, and you had a pretty pleasant day at the beach. I also want people to know that sharks are ecologically important animals. Not only are they not bad, but they're actively good. They help structure the coastal food webs that billions of humans depend on for food and hundreds of millions of humans depend on for jobs. And also, as mentioned earlier, sharks are highly threatened. We are in danger of losing some species forever. These are animals that are not only older than dinosaurs, but older than trees. There were sharks swimming in the ocean before Saturn had rings. There were sharks swimming in the ocean before the North Star existed. And we have lost half of all sharks in my parents' lifetime. It's absolutely staggering conservation statistics. So a big problem that I face, other than some people who don't want to help sharks at all, is increasingly people who do want to help sharks. They're inspired to act, they care about the ocean, they care about endangered species, but they misunderstand what the problems are and they misunderstand what the solutions are, and that does not help. So an important lesson that I've learned is that wanting to help and trying to help are great, but wanting to help and trying to help are not the same thing as actually helping. Whether or not something actually helps is an answerable question, and often an answered question. Whenever there's some new idiot who tries something like this on social media, they say, well, you don't know, we should try something. People have tried this, we tested it, it doesn't work. Science exists, data exists, evidence exists, reality exists. You can tell that this is a sore subject for me during Shark Week. So some particularly ridiculous examples of this, though there are many, is we have what are a term, I'm trying to get it in the peer-reviewed scientific journal literature, of macho cowboy idiot scuba divers, people who ride sharks and hug sharks and kiss sharks. They kiss sharks, you guys. They grab a shark, they take the bitey end of the shark and they put it on their face. And they say, I'm doing conservation. Don't do that. Don't do that. And another example of this is these amateur-made conservation petitions, which I'm sure exist in your various areas of expertise. This one is from 2018, and it received 60,000 people who signed this petition to ban the practice of shark finning in Florida. Not one of these people was apparently aware that we banned shark finning in Florida in 1993. This is a petition that cannot possibly accomplish its stated goal because its stated goal was accomplished before the person who made the petition was born. All this does is confuse people about what the threats are, what the solutions are, and makes them think they've helped when they have not. So misunderstanding these problems does have actual scientific conservation and management plan consequences. Conservation misinformation has been a recent area of research of mine, and I was quite amused as I was driving into Atlantic City yesterday that right as I crossed the bridge, I passed a giant billboard that says, "Don't worry, whales, we'll save you from the evil offshore wind people." So certainly timely as I'm talking about conservation misinformation. But critically here, raising awareness of wrong facts does not help anything. When people are criticized for this, they say, well, I'm just raising awareness. No, you're not. You're lying to people, and that's not the same thing. Raising awareness is a vital step in conservation advocacy. Raising awareness of wrong information does not help anyone or anything. Don't do it. And a final thing that I want people to know is that it is not too late to save these animals. We know how to save sharks. We have a variety of policy solutions that exist that we know they work. We know when to implement them. We know what we need to make them work. We know when we need your help. We know when we do not need your help. So that we know how to fix these problems, but we need your help to do it. So what I need people to know when I'm doing my public-facing outreach is that sharks are not a threat to you and your family. They're ecologically important animals, but they face very serious conservation challenges. We need your help to save them, but it matters what you do to help. You need to help us, not reinvent the wheel poorly on your own. And a lot of what people know, sarcastic air quotes, know about sharks is wrong, leaving a clear path for engagement from experts. So some other things that I do to help is I do a lot of writing, including freelance science journalism. Here are some articles I've written recently about international shark conservation policy, public misunderstanding of these issues, current ongoing issues in ocean conservation policy and law, why we should save certain government agencies, things like that. So I do a lot of writing in addition to my speaking tour. And an important lesson that I've learned from that is in journal. Some of you I was chatting with last night said that you have a background in journalism. An important lesson from the world of journalism is no one owes you their eyeballs. What that means is there's a lot of things happening in the world. More than there should be, perhaps. Certainly more than there used to be. And people do not have infinite attention. How do you get them to care? You make it matter to their lives and interests. You make it relevant to their lives and interests. And part of the problem here, from the side of my part of the world of scientists communicating their research, is flooding the zone with stuff that doesn't matter that much. It is vitally important, as I said, that scientists leave the ivory tower and engage with the public about science, but that does not mean that every single scientific research paper needs a full court press media approach. A lot of them are simply not that relevant to people's lives, which does not mean that they're bad science. I generally focus my talks not on my own work, but on a broad synthesis of conclusions, including some of my own work and including that of many of my colleagues. So you do not need to make sure that everyone in the world is aware of every single thing that scientists are doing, because a lot of it is not that relevant or frankly interesting. Another thing that I've learned is that, and a thing that I do a lot of in training scientists how to communicate with people who are not scientists, is that a lot of technical subject matter area experts, including conservation policy experts such as many of you, people are really bad even when they're actively trying to coordinate and target their message to their audience's level of understanding. They're real bad at understanding what people know and don't know about their field already. And this is a great comic from XKCD that says this point. Even when they're trying to compensate for it, experts in anything always wildly overestimate the average person's familiarity with their field. Here, silicate chemistry is second nature to us geochemists, so it's easy to forget that the average person probably only knows the formulas for olivine and maybe one or two feldspars. I have had basically this exact same conversation hundreds of times with experts in a variety of fields. So another thing that I do is teaching and training. I do professional development training workshops all over the world. We have another one right in this room tomorrow morning, if you guys aren't sick of hearing me rant yet. But I'd also be happy to chat with you about doing one of these for your home institutions or agencies. I also teach a graduate level science communication course That's become a core class for 3 different departments at one of the universities where I work. Another important lesson that I've learned from that space is the idea of the knowledge deficit model and how it does not work. Some of you, show of hands, how many of you have heard this term before, knowledge deficit model? I see 3 hands. There are a lot of you whose public outreach uses this even if you don't call it that. So this is the premise of the knowledge deficit model is, I'm an expert, I'm really smart, I know a lot of facts about this situation, and I support policy outcome A. You are not an expert, you don't know as many facts as me, you support policy outcome B. If I just shout some facts at you, you will change what policy preference you support. It does not work. Facts still matter, but you need to do more than just shout facts in someone's general direction. It needs to be crafted as part of a narrative persuasive argument to make people care. So accurate facts still matter. If people do not know the facts, there is no way they will change their mind. But facts alone do not ever change hearts and minds, and no one likes the well, actually, you're wrong guy. If you do want to learn more about how this actually works, I have an article in Revelator News, which is an excellent environmental news site, called How to Make Friends and Influence People to Save the World. What persuades people to help protect threatened species and ecosystems? Most scientists think facts alone will change minds. They're wrong. So another thing I do is speak to the youths. And I speak to school groups all over the world in person or via Zoom from March to May 2020, when everything was on fire and everyone was locked down. I reached out via social media and managed to speak to temporarily homeschooled via Zoom groups in all 50 US states. That was really cool. I managed to reach 49 of them all on my own. And then Wyoming Department of Education heard that I hadn't reached anyone in Wyoming yet. They put up this Facebook post, and I ended up giving about 20 talks in Wyoming. But I love doing this. If any of you are parents or work at schools or have schools in your community, I'd love to speak to people there. Never a charge for public schools, so come chat with me after. Another thing that I do to help is strategic communications planning for science groups, for environmental advocacy groups, and things like that. Generally speaking, a strategic communications plan, which is usually done at the institutional level but not the individual level, should include more elements than most of them typically do. A strategic communications plan should include a specific goal. What would we like to be different as a result of us doing this? If you do not have a goal and it's not written down, you have no idea if you're accomplishing your goal, and you guys would be shocked at how often that happens. Maybe you wouldn't be. You should assess the current state of affairs. What's the problem we're trying to fix? You should identify your audience, and your audience is absolutely not the public. You should propose multiple channels and messages. So an important lesson associated with this, and something that I find many scientists in particular struggle with, is people are familiar with a lot of tools that can be used in service of a strategic communications plan, but tools themselves are not a strategy. I ask people for their communications plan, and they say, oh, our communications plan is Instagram. No, Instagram is a tool that absolutely can be used in service of a strategy, but Instagram is not a strategy. If I ask you to see the blueprints of how you're going to build a house, and you hand me a screwdriver, I'm going to look at you like you're crazy, and this is absolutely the same. There's also an important lesson here. If any of you have friends or relatives in the marketing world, you've probably heard this: the difference between an output and an outcome. An output is something you control, you influence. An output is, for example, I posted 10 times on Instagram about how plastic bags are bad for sea turtles. Whereas an outcome, in contrast, is what happens because of that. Because I posted 10 times on Instagram about how plastic bags are bad for sea turtles, 5 of my social media followers bought reusable canvas bags and stopped using plastic bags. Do you guys see the difference there? One of those is way harder to measure, but it also matters a lot more. At the end of the day, the sea turtles don't care what I did on Instagram. They care that there are fewer plastic bags in their environment. So in summary here, a public science engagement is good for the public and good for science when it's done well. I've found that more scientists than ever want to do this, but many do not know how, or they use wildly wrong or outdated models for how to do it. It matters what we should communicate science more, we should communicate conservation more, we should communicate environmental policy more, but it matters what we communicate and how we communicate it, and that requires strategic communications planning. So for folks who want to do this sort of stuff yourself, with the understanding that many of the people in this room are already doing this quite well, some general tips that I want to share are know your audience and go where your audience is. This can be literally, I know some of you set up sort of mobile information stations at fishing piers or at things like that, but it can also mean digitally. I gave a workshop at an international conference in Brazil about how to use then Twitter to communicate shark science and conservation. And one of the attendees came up to me after and said, that was really great. I can't wait to go home and use Twitter to talk to shark fishermen in Belize. But I've found that shark fishermen in Belize don't really use Twitter, so how can I use Twitter to reach them? Well, you can't. It's that simple. It does not matter how important your message is. It doesn't matter how well crafted your message is. If you are shouting into the void where your audience is not, you will not reach them, period, end of discussion. If you are going to be doing one-on-one level discussion, which I know some of you do, maybe you're engaging with one hunter, with one angler, with one member of your community, curious about invasive species or wildflower gardens or things like that. It's important to listen as much as you speak, if not more, and treat your audience with respect, which can be hard because I'm sure we all have stories of people asking some goofy-ass questions, but you treat them with respect. You talk with someone and you do not talk at them. And if you do that, that is a great first step in winning hearts and minds over to the cause of evidence-based conservation policymaking. I have worked with lots of commercial shark fishermen in the southeastern United States. That is a group that I do not agree with on much, but they're an important group that we need to persuade to voluntarily adopt some certain practices. And I have had these crusty old fishing captain guys come up to me and say, you know, I've been doing this for 30, 40 years, and you're the first scientist I've ever talked to who hasn't acted like you think I'm stupid. We should not be making our target audience think that we think they're stupid. That's not good. And I usually tell them, I don't think you're stupid, I think you're wrong. And then they laugh and we can start to have a conversation. But treat your audience with respect if you want them to listen to you. No one in the history of the world has ever been persuaded by someone coming from out of town and saying, you're stupid, listen to me. If you want to do organizational level communication, one-to-many type communication, creating open and welcoming type events can be really helpful, and this includes going to where people are. Not everyone wants to spend their Saturday night listening to an hour-long science lecture at a museum, I've been told. Most of my friends are happy to do that, but I've been told there are people who don't like doing that stuff. So this is something that the National Academy of Scientists used to do, called two scientists walk into a bar, and they would just go to set up these stations in these bars around cities, advertise on the bar's websites and with signage. Hey, if you want to talk about dinosaurs, go talk to that guy. He's a paleontologist at the museum, and he is here to answer your questions about dinosaurs and stuff like this. And this was a wildly popular program. I did it a lot because it paid my bar tab. But it was a really fun and informal and welcoming way to do it, and I had some great conversations with people I absolutely would not otherwise reach. Not everyone has the budget or flexibility to travel around the world talking about your area of expertise. This is me in Antarctica. I did give a talk about my book at Antarctica, so I have given an invited professional lecture on all 7 continents. Here you have me talking about sharks to a group of indifferent penguins behind me, but I recognize that perhaps not everyone has the flexibility or budget to do things like that. But the good news is you don't have to. Working together with the many people in this room and your colleagues at your home institutions, we can reach a lot of people, even if each of us only reach a few. This is my friend and colleague Asha DeVos. She's a Sri Lankan whale scientist, and she's absolutely awesome person, but she has this great expression that every coastline needs a hero. That what we don't need is big, giant nonprofit groups like WWF or the Nature Conservancy identifying on a map places that they've never been to that we should protect this. What we need is someone from that community saying, no, I'm fourth generation from here, this bay is important, it's being overexploited, we need to protect it. And you can be the hero for your own coastline with the understanding that some of you people work on land stuff, apparently. Consider it a metaphorical coastline, your forest, your canyon, whatever. You also do not need to reinvent the wheel. You can join existing campaigns. For example, the wonderful organization Stand Up for Science, which is creating all of these rallies in support of NOAA, the National Science Foundation, the EPA, all over the country. They have this summer of action happening now where they're trying to get people to speak in their local communities about their area of expertise in a fun, engaging lecture, but thrown in there is, and that's why we should support the EPA, and that's why public funding of research grants is important. I did the first one of these and kicked off the campaign. I trained over 100 of their other volunteers that are doing this all over the US. I'd be delighted to put you in touch with people at Stand Up for Science if you want to join this. They're trying to do 1,000 of these this year. Another important point when you're crafting your messages is you should know your take-home message. You guys, like me, go to a lot of PowerPoint talks. If I were to ask you to think of a talk that you attended 7 talks ago and tell me word for word everything the person said, I bet you can't do it. But if I were to ask you the last talk you attended that you really, really liked, what was a summary of it? I bet you can do that. That's the take-home message. And you can, and I would say should, absolutely structure your talk with the take-home message in mind. And if you don't know what the take-home message is going to be, neither will your audience. So some examples from my world. Sometimes my goal is just to educate people about a problem. Sometimes my goal is to get people to change their own behavior to help solve the problem. Sometimes my goal is to promote my own work. And this is the difference between framing a talk as, did you know sharks are in trouble, versus here's a thing you can do to help sharks that are in trouble, versus I found a way to help sharks that are in trouble, please fund my work and support me. And probably 85% of the content of those talks are the same, but the take-home message, the structure, the hooks are different, and you can do that too. A case study of this, if you want to learn a lot more about this, implementing a strategic communication plan of some of my strategic research, or of some of my PhD research, and working with some of your colleagues at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, we managed to change Florida state law with respect to fishing for critically endangered hammerhead sharks. Because of this research and because of this communications plan, conservatively 30,000 hammerhead sharks are alive now that would not be otherwise, which is a pretty cool legacy from graduate school. But I wrote this up as a case study in the online journal Conservation Science and Practice. If you want to learn a lot more about this, make sure to read the supplemental online information. This paper is about 1.5 pages. The supplemental online information is about 500 pages. It's everything I ever wrote, everyone I spoke to, drafts of the policy plan, every op-ed I wrote, every media interview I gave, notes from meetings, etc. So this absolutely can work. An important note is when you are talking to the public, part of treating your audience with respect is a rule that I always use, is never underestimate your audience's intelligence, but always underestimate their vocabulary. We know a lot of 15-syllable words. It is a consequence of the world that of the professional world that we live in. Most people can understand those concepts even if they don't know those 15-syllable words. So that's jargon. And I encourage people, and including my consulting clients and communication students, to use jargon essentially not at all, or at the very least sparingly. And I do not ever want to hear anyone say that you are dumbing it down by doing that, because you are not dumbing it down, because you're not talking to someone who is dumb. You are talking to someone who is smart at something different from what you're smart at. And if you internalize that, you will treat your audience with respect. But this is another XKCD comic. This is Upgoer 5. The creator of XKCD wanted to see if he could explain the Saturn V rocket, which brought humans to the moon, the most complicated piece of transportation technology ever made, using only the 1,000 most commonly used words in the English language. I say 1,000 because 1,000 is not one of the 1,000 most commonly used words in the English language. So what you get is things like stuff to burn, to make the box with people in it fly really fast. And NASA absolutely loved this because, first of all, it's adorable, but also it's not wrong. They were able to explain this clearly and accurately. This was so popular that Upgoer 5 made a little web application where you can put your own words in there and it tells you what words are not approved. These are words from one of my recent paper abstracts, and almost every word is underlined as no, you can't use that. A fun example from a training I did recently with NOAA friends was the NOAA coral reef bleaching team was trying to revamp their public engagement strategy, and they were trying to struggle how to explain symbiotic zooxanthellae that photosynthesize, that live inside the coral. That's what's expelled during coral bleaching. And what they came up with using Upgoer 5 was sun-eating friends. And what I love about sun-eating friends is, first of all, it's evocative as hell, but also it's not wrong. A symbiotic photosynthetic organism is a sun-eating friend. Another lesson, and one that took me personally way too long to learn, is that sometimes the messenger matters as much or more than the message. There are fishing communities that absolutely will not listen to anything I say because it's me saying it. Even if they don't really feel that strongly about the policy issue, they personally despise me. And if I care more about getting a policy change than I care about my own glory, I can talk to a reasonable member of that community and have them raise it, and then it's a brilliant idea because it came from Steve and not me. You can absolutely do this. And this, tied up in this is this idea that representation matters, that there are a lot of communities who we need to reach that where I don't look like them. And maybe they would rather hear it from someone who they do look like. So I work with some of those organizations. One of my favorite in my world is called Minorities in Shark Sciences. I am a proud member of their organized allyship program. But we wrote this paper about my other professional society, the American Elasmobranch Society, that Elasmobranchus shark skates and rays. And our community has some problems with diversity, equity, and inclusion, to put it mildly. We can talk more about that later if you're curious. But I assembled a team of basically anyone who I had ever seen publicly criticize these policies, and we got together and we came up with actionable solutions for what specifically can the society do to make things more welcoming, to make things more equitable, to make things more inclusive. And when we got this together, I said, so who wants to be the lead author and who wants to be the one who presents this? And our team, who overwhelmingly consisted of people who are not white men, said, you should do it because they'll listen if it comes from you. Some of you may have heard the term heap eating. Anybody heard that? Show of hands. About what I thought? Everyone who raised their hand is female. Heap eating is when a woman in a meeting suggests something and it gets completely ignored, and then a man sitting next to them says the exact same thing and is told it's brilliant. So we can do that strategically. I was asked to heap eat a message. And a final lesson that I want to leave you with, this is the image from the title slide here, is that we should absolutely be professional, and we should take what we work on is important. What we do matters, and we should absolutely take our jobs seriously, but that does not mean taking yourself too seriously. Professional need not mean stuffy, dry, and boring. Effective public science engagement can be silly, and a thing that I have found is if it's not fun, do something else. I love this. This is a talk I gave to hundreds of people at the opening of a science museum in Miami. And it was absolutely, and there were like the governor of Florida was there, the mayor of Miami was there. This was a serious event. And I got up on stage dressed in a Katy Perry onesie. And I had a blast. And if it's not fun, you are doing it wrong and you should do something else. So in summary, overall here, before I start taking your questions, public science engagement matters more than ever. Science is under attack, conservation is under attack, scientists and conservationists are under attack, and we need to break out of the ivory tower and engage with the public. But it matters what we do, and it matters how we do it. There are lots of ways to do it and no one right way, but there are lots of common mistakes that people make. There are some things that work really well that should be considered. There are some things that never work and should be avoided like the plague. When done correctly, when done strategically, public science engagement even about complicated conservation and policy issues can absolutely change your little corner of the world, but you need a goal, you need a strategy, you need evidence, and you need to use the right tool for the job as well as the right messenger and all of these other things. If anyone would like to chat more about this, again, I met many of you last night, but I see some new faces here, so come find me at the break or at lunch or at the auction. I also left a stack of my business cards on this front table here, if any of you are shy and want to email later. I would love to come speak in your communities for a book tour talk, or if you host research seminars or things like that. I would like to thank ACI for hosting me, especially Linda and Judy, who've been absolutely wonderful to work with throughout all of this. Thanks to my numerous collaborators and co-authors and colleagues whose work I've cited throughout here. And thank you for listening. I'll invite you again to follow me on social media at Why Sharks Matter. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions. It looks like we have a roving mic for questions. Yeah.
Until recently in Hawaii, my agency handled all of the initial, we don't call it shark attacks like media likes to call it.
Shark bite incidents, yes.
Yeah, or we just call them shark incidents.
Mm-hmm.
We turned it over to the counties for a lot of obvious reasons in the past 6 months, but I did most of that over the past decade, and one of the frequent questions is talking about using humor, and I'm not sure, I'm hoping you have a better answer than I had. One of the most frequently asked questions by the media is, well, why did the shark bite? And my response was, well, until we can interview the shark, we don't know. Mm-hmm. So is there a better answer to that?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you answer in the very rare cases where sharks do injure or even kill someone, and the journalist asks, why did the shark bite that person? How do you answer it? The snarky answer that I would give is very similar to what Dan just said, which is we can't interview the shark, so we don't know. But what I usually say is anyone who says they know exactly why a wild animal does or doesn't do something is someone you should be skeptical of listening to. But also, leading theories for why sharks sometimes bite people are mistaken identity. These animals, again, have been swimming in the oceans since before there were trees on land. And for almost all of that time, everything swimming in their environment was food. It is only in the last couple hundred years where that black rubbery shape is not a seal, but a human wearing neoprene rubber designed to insulate them like a seal, riding on a surfboard that looks like a seal from below. So, without minimizing human suffering here, I also point out how rare these things are. That hundreds of millions of humans go in the ocean every year. On average, 60 to 70 are bitten. Not 60 to 70 million, not 60 to 70,000, 60 to 70. If you've been in the ocean, there has been a shark near you, even if you didn't see it and it left you alone. So condolences to the victims, but it's important to keep in mind that this is astronomically unlikely. I just last week at a conference heard a staggering statistic about this unlikeliness, that my colleagues in California said that in a typical year in California, there are 3 bites by sharks, and there are 10,000 stingray stings at the beaches. The stingray stings usually require more serious medical attention than the shark bites, and you can't find, and when a stingray stings someone and they have to be medevaced, that's not news. But when a shark nibbles a little bit such that the person needs a Band-Aid, not stitches, that's headline news all over the world. Brutal shark attack off the beaches, hide your families. So it's a tricky balance for sure, and I will really concede that government agencies perhaps have more limitations on what they can and can't say when dealing with public tragedies than I as a private citizen do. Thanks, Dan.
So it's really refreshing to have a scientist speak our language, right? But I want to know more about you. Did you come to these conclusions based on trial and error, or did you study social science, or how did you...
Great question. So I'll tell you guys a very abbreviated version of my life story. That I've loved sharks, as you saw, for a very long time. I always wanted to be a marine biologist. I studied biology with a concentration in marine science in undergrad at Duke. I studied pure marine biology at the College of Charleston. My master's thesis was looking at food web ecology of sandbar sharks. And then I was recruited to this interdisciplinary PhD program. So interdisciplinary meaning natural science and social science working together to solve a problem. And the pitch that sold me was, you like studying these animals, but you keep hearing that they're endangered and they need help. When we pass laws, they don't actually tell the fish what to do. They tell humans how to interact with the fish. So maybe we should understand the human side a little more. And I said, that's a really good point. So my PhD thesis was half food web ecology using the same methods, but moving into, and what does this tell us about the animal's threatened status? Here are some emerging threats, here are some policy solutions type stuff. And from there I did a postdoctoral fellowship in conservation leadership. So I sort of, a lot of these conversations happened at conferences where I would give a talk on like, this is what sandbar sharks eat and how it changes when they get bigger. And the person after me would say, oh, by the way, sandbar sharks are now assessed as endangered by the IUCN Red List, and they're overfished, and we need to protect this critical habitat. And I would say, well, who's doing that? Who's leaving this room and communicating to the public and to decision makers and to journalists? And they would say, I don't know, I wrote it in a paper. So it was an identified need through experience and both education.
Just for clarification, what is the best shark?
Oh, yes. So a very important role that I have in my capacity as one of the most followed scientists on social media and sort of the leader of shark social media is identifying the hashtag best shark, which I auctioned off last year the right for someone else to get to pick their favorite shark as the best shark for the year. I commissioned a custom wrestling championship belt for this and had a friend who's actually an AEW professional wrestler record a video introducing it. But as of last Monday, that year has ended and we are back to sandbar sharks being the hashtag best shark.
Thanks for the talk. I just wanted to ask, you said that it took you too long to figure out how important the messenger might be for delivering the message. Any other lessons learned on something else you learned that took too long to learn that you think is really important?
Yeah, a great question. So I am by nature something of a sarcastic jerk, and sometimes that plays really well and sometimes it doesn't. So I have found, I was talking with some of you last night when I was wearing my less business casual appropriate shark wear, that I have found that there's value in figuring out real quick if people I'm interacting with get me or if I need to tone it down, and part of that is wearing these ridiculous shirts. And some people are like, oh, that's a great shirt. Okay, we jive, I can get this working. And some people are just looking at me like, who is this guy? And I know I have to put on a theater persona of business professional for them.
Thank you.
Maybe one more?
So where do you get your shirts?
Where do I get my shirts? That is a great question to end on, Dan. Thank you. So the hilarious answer to this is I don't get them. They come to me. One of the perhaps less profitable but most entertaining elements of my diversified business portfolio is I am a certified Instagram fashion influencer. I actually get a W-9 from Instagram, and shirts like this, the company, which is Hard Daddy, send it to me in exchange for me wearing it in a social media post and tagging them. So I have probably 200 of these shirts, and I don't buy them. All right. Well, thanks everybody very much. I am here all day, and I will be here tomorrow morning for the workshop. I appreciate you having me.